know many of you already. I'm the director for something called the Institute for Research Sensing, otherwise known as IRiS. We've been around about 5 years now. We're a UC interdisciplinary research institute that's focused on the topics of sensing, perception, and sensor technology development. And because we have quite a few new folks that might not understand the UC ecosystem, sensing and sensor technology development have been strengths at the University of Cincinnati for going on 40 years now. But that conversation has largely been held on the inside of the STEM disciplines. So in engineering, I'm in the Department of Biological Sciences, where I'm a sensory biologist studying the evolution of visual sensation and visual communication. Part of the reason that I'm here in Cincinnati is because of that campus-wide strength in sensing and perception. Of course, we have the Center for Cognition, Action, and Perception, directed by Tamara Lorenz here, in psychology that draws across the university, but engineering departments are oftentimes thinking about novel sensor technologies. There have been some efforts to strategically unite people on that front here, but largely concentrated in the sciences. So the project of IRiS is really to leverage other strengths at the university. One of the unique things about the University of Cincinnati is that we have a world-class design, architecture, and planning school. We also have one of the best conservatories of music in the nation. And we have exceptional strengths in the social sciences and the humanities, where these kinds of questions about the perception of reality are really present and important. So the project of IRiS is to bring those voices into conversation alongside these STEM disciplines to think creatively and more holistically about topics related to sensing, really writ very large. The Alloy series is a public-facing event series that we've been doing for 4 years now. This is our 24th Alloy. They're always off campus, they're always pop-up events, they're always in some unusual location. We never repeat. We've done things at an art house in Camp Washington called the Swing House. We've done them in the middle of an Art Deco airport terminal at Lunken Airport. We've done them in the American Sign Museum and a variety of other locations around town. Here you are with swing dancing upstairs at what was, I think, a theater mostly serving veterans of the First and Second World Wars, and then for a while held by the Deaf Institute of Cincinnati, and now an event space that does things like swing dancing and what we're up to here. So really appreciate you being here. I know a number of you are here from the two-day conference that's being coordinated by Tony Chimero and Andre Curtis Trudell. Where's Andre? There you are. Thank you for bringing all of these brilliant folks in to help us to think about this interface between the humanities and technology. We always have a theme, but we like to keep these themes really broad to give us some space to move. So our theme tonight is about AI, perception, and planetary change, although we workshopped a bunch of different titles. So there's a lot of space between those three sets of words, and that's the space that we're going to explore tonight. The concept of an alloy is to start conversation, a bit of a seed crystal in the center here, but as I had mentioned earlier, we really want audience participation. When these work well, the audience is speaking as much of the time as the people that we've invited in to the center. So this is not a panel discussion. You're not going to passively absorb the brilliance of these people. Well, maybe you will, but like encouragement to engage with it, to think about it creatively, to interrogate whether or not it comports with your own experience. I've already prompted the folks here, which I'll introduce in a second, to speak from personal experience. This is meant to be a conversation. They are not here as archetypes of their disciplines or here for their employer or in any kind of way. They're here to be real, whole, three-dimensional people, all right? And we're asking the same from you. So we're going to spend about an hour in conversation. We are live streaming this on YouTube. We've actually even just gotten requests. This is something that we did in the heart of COVID when we launched as a research institute. I'm like, how are we going to do this? We need to be in person, but like, how do we do this safely? And how do we engage with audiences that don't feel safe in person? And we've just carried it forward. So anything you say can and will be held against you. No, I'm just kidding. But so anyway, just to note that this is being live streamed on YouTube and will be archived if you want to go back. If you didn't take notes about something that was particularly compelling to you, we will that'll be available to you. All right. Okay, so I'm going to introduce the folks in the center. I've already introduced myself. I'm going to start with Robin.
Okay.
So thanks for being with us, Robin. Robin Zebrowski is a professor of cognitive science at, is it Beloit?
Beloit.
Good, yes. Terribly mispronounced if you were French. Beloit College in Wisconsin, and her primary areas of research involve embodied cognition, AI, and our relationship to our technologies. So thanks for being with us, Robin.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, well, next over here is Elmo Feiten. Elmo got his PhD here in philosophy. I was actually on his committee. He came to lab meetings. It's great to have you back in town from Penn State University. And Elmo is a research and teaching professor at Penn State University, where he conducts research situated broadly within the philosophy of science, with a focus on the sciences of life, mind, and artificial intelligence. PhD focused on Umwelt, the concept of Umwelt, or the kind of sensed or perceived world of others. Really fascinating stuff. Maybe some of that will show up here. Okay, Jelle Bruineberg, here from the University of Copenhagen. Lovely city. Have had some wonderful experiences there. Theoretical neuroscientist and philosopher in the School of Communication there, where they focus on embodied cognitive science as well as the science and philosophy and phenomenology of attention. And we heard a bit about that this morning. So, and last but not least, Takunda Matose right here is a researcher and bioethicist here at Cincinnati Children's Hospital with an affiliation with the University of Cincinnati, focused on healthcare justice, health inequalities, and research ethics. His current work explores whether ambient documentation AI, which many of you, if you've been to the doctor recently, have been asked, is it okay if I use a computer program to assist me right now in my note-taking? This is the kind of thing that Takunda is interested in, whether it can be used to connect patients to resources that address socially determined healthcare needs. All right, so cool people to talk to. All right. So I'm going to sit down at this point in time. Can people hear?
Yeah.
Everybody's close enough? Anybody need a drink ticket? I'm not pushing. Oh, reminder to tip Emma and Jeremy. I am also going to tip them, but they deserve all the tips. So yeah, thank you to both of you for being here, and to the lounge for having us. Okay, so the way this is going to work, we're going to start with one question that all of these folks can answer in kind of a pop-up, popcorn style, when the spirit moves you fashion, and then the conversation just free-flowing after that. I don't have any questions beyond this prepared, all right? So we're just in it, okay? So the question really is about what is your relationship in your work with the ideas of AI, perception, and planetary change? And it doesn't have to be all three of those. It could be some subset of those, but what do you want to share about how you relate to this topic?
I don't think this is particularly planetary, but I feel like there's something cursed happening when I have this ambient suspicion when I read students' writing, when I get assigned as a reviewer of a paper, that it's almost like a kind of like low-boil paranoia, where I wonder whether this was actually written by the person who submitted it or by a large language model. And it's sad if I waste my time. I spend like still an hour and a half on a paper that ultimately I'm pretty sure was generated with AI and is also, independent of that, just very bad and shouldn't be published. But especially in the cases where something is not AI generated, it just kind of corrodes some of the social fabric that we had, where like you can just trust that the other person is actually generating meaningful language and sharing it with you. And now I'm sad.
Yeah, we had this conversation in our last Alloys about this erosion of trust and what that means. Can we trust what we're seeing online? Can we trust photographs anymore? That they used to be this medium that felt like it carried truth with it in some kind of way. Writing now invaded by this. So yeah.
I think that relates to the kind of like planetary change kind of question as well, right? So I think one aspect of planetary change is that it's by definition distributed, both over place and over time, such that no individual person can kind of like directly perceive it at any point in time. And so in order to be able to perceive it, it requires us to kind of like to put those distributed pieces together into one coherent kind of narrative. And that is difficult enough in itself, but there kind of like that by definition also requires a kind of like trust about the observation of other people and trust that picture is put together in a kind of like intuitive kind of way. So I think that also there the kind of the in order to perceive it, kind of like the trust in the observation of other people is inimitable, and that is exactly one of the problems where I think also kind of AI and in general kind of like the more and more mediation of those experiences kind of like by technological devices, and so kind of it makes it possible to kind of put that picture together, but at the same time also makes it open for manipulation and open for distortion, and so it makes it hard to kind of like really get the picture sharp.
The age of the spectacle in many ways.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, so I'll say something. So I stopped teaching undergrads about a year and a half ago, which I'm like, thank God. There are a lot of wonderful things I miss about it, but the AI component, fortunately, I'm like glad to not think about that. But as Nate noted, I'm now in a hospital. And so I've been thinking about this more in terms of what we're doing in clinical settings. Like I'm interested in the ambient AI and like what it's capturing and doing. But I think one of the things that I'm noticing more and more, and I talked to my colleague Elizabeth, who's over here, right? Like we've now had this whole suite of AI tools that have just been foisted on us in the hospital. And it's like an interesting context where also, it's healthcare. So we're told, hey, look, if we have AI, it's gonna, solve all sorts of problems. We're gonna do drug discovery. We're gonna figure out treatments that we've, never been able to figure out before. But I think one of the things that's, kind of coming out of this is, we use a lot of third-party vendors in ways that we haven't before. And a lot of those are the AI companies. And I think part of what that is doing is actually making imperceptible the environmental impact of all these tools that we're being asked to use, right? Like, and they're complex machines, they're complex systems that are doing these very intricate, sophisticated things, but all we get is sort of like, oh, but wouldn't it be nice if you can get this easy solution from it? And it's kind of hiding all these very complex things that are happening behind it, including the very real environmental impact. So that's one of the things that I'm struggling with, because I think healthcare is important, and I'm glad we're doing the things we're doing, but are the researchers and clinicians really aware about the kind of impact that's happening behind the scenes?
So I can say AI has been my primary area of research since I was trained as an undergrad in the 90s. And I was I shouldn't say was, but very positive about the methodological process of studying AI to learn about human cognition and human minds. And then generative AI came on the scene and got billions and billions of dollars and really started to burn down the planet. And now I feel like half of my job has changed from doing that otherwise interesting methodological, ontological investigation to telling people, please stop using generative AI, you are burning down the planet. Like, I feel like it's taken my discipline down with it in some ways, that like I have to, rehab the entire discipline of cognitive science because of what OpenAI has done.
It's interesting. We had an author and journalist here in the fall, Ed Young, who gave a talk. And he recently wrote a book called An Immense World, which is about animal perception of the world. Fantastic read. And Ali, who's somewhere here, asked him a question about like the Umfeld of AI. Like, was there a sensory or perceptual space for AI? And his response was very clear. He said, I won't entertain questions about AI until that generate answers from the living world until AI stops threatening the living world, until we resolve this conflict between our natural ecosystems and this even oftentimes recreational or personal use of AI to cut corners or to do other things, right? So there is this conflict now suddenly at the heart of this narrative around adoption and usage of AI that I appreciate is part of the broader narrative now. But it does create these conflicts if you think there might be value to AI alongside asking these questions.
And there's also like this weird idea that because we are not really like the progress of AI in the last few years has been so immense that a lot of people think that we can't possibly imagine all the amazing things that we'll be capable of doing in 5 years. So if we keep investing in it, maybe it can just help us solve all these climate problems in the future that it's now creating. And it reminds me of a gambling addiction, which is the only addiction where you think that the thing that's actually the problem also might be the solution. Because if you happen to win, then the reason why everyone hates you will suddenly be fixed, and you can pay your mortgage after all, and so on, and you can get back all
back the house.
You can buy it, yeah. So it's a little bit like that, I think.
Yeah, it's an interesting, rapidly moving technology that has these contradictions at the heart of it, I think, for many people that benefit from ignorance or from looking the other way, but don't resolve with attention necessarily either.
I think also they're right, so that the kind of like the artificial intelligence contrast with the kind of computational dumbness, where kind of like it is, in many ways, a kind of like many parameter kind of brute forcing kind of like a computationally really expensive kind of technique that occasionally kind of leads to kind of like very kind of like interesting outcomes, but at the expense of using amounts of energy that are much higher than, for example, our own brains that can do comparable kind of things. So there's something deeply inefficient about the kind of computational technology that is, at least at the current stage, kind of like generating these things.
This topic, this contradiction of the sort of worldly cost or energy cost of this technology is something that I kind of signaled at vaguely in my talk when I talked about this world. And it's really interesting in that it brings to me like what I think embeddedness in the ease of cognition, or when you talk about ecological psychology or taking this radical embodied approach, which tries to describe your cognitive experience or even like your trust in writing, this sort of social cognitive milieu is distributed that includes the environment. But usually in the scientific eco-psych world, especially when it's in the psych lab, is talking about the environment lowercase e. But the environment means this environment, right? Like the terrestrial environment, this one, right? So in fact, if you want cognition and you want trust in writing and you want social fabric to function, building a technology that destroys or destabilizes that is in direct contradiction to it. And so that one of the draws of the more like radical embodied or 4E kind of umbrella, I don't know if it's just me, but there's other people who might be drawn to it as well, is this necessary engagement with that reality, right? That this world matters, that this kind of engagement matters, that this materiality matters, that this practice matters, that social milieu matters. And even though we're cognitive scientists, that we have to talk about it, right? Or we should have been talking about it before, maybe, too.
I think interesting to what you were talking about your field burning down along with OpenAI. I follow a lot of the work of Olivia Guest and IRiS Director and Abebe Berhan, right?
Yeah.
Who write sort of collectively about AI as automated plagiarism. We don't know where the sources are that are coming in this content that it's giving you. Even if an AI is giving you a source, it's the most probable source it could have maybe possibly come from, but it doesn't know for sure. And sometimes I feel like, A, I'm too online and I should maybe be a little bit less distracted, give me some friction. But B, I feel like cognitive scientists are just shouting into the void because nobody is sort of listening outside of like our discipline to the fact that these machines are accidentally right maybe sometimes, but they're wrong a lot of the times. And the kind of erosion of trust that we're building, or the way we're sort of automating the ease to just kind of bullshit. You know, it's really, really easy to bullshit now. There's no epistemic cost to it. There's no increasingly, like, you're not going to be shamed for using AI because everybody says adopt it. And we're just kind of like, we're all in this room, we care, we're talking about it, but outside of this room, how do we get out of the void and also tell people, hey, stop using this while it's burning down the world?
I think one important thing that has to happen is the laws have to change, because I was just reading about Ohio is moving to put all these data centers in the middle of the farmlands, and these little towns don't have the sort of zoning and the laws to deal with saying no appropriately. And the AI bros, the tech bros know that, and they're taking advantage of little towns all over the country. And until we get the law to change and buttress that, I think we can't really fight back environmentally.
Can I say something?
Yeah, of course.
So, I'll play the devil's advocate. Nate has asked me to be the devil.
I did.
Enough support you.
And he's graded, by the way.
So, I'm graded for my ego. So I hear many different things. I think the environmental objection to AI is the most substantive, because that is really concrete. It's a real big problem. I think a lot of the ego actually lies less in the technology and more in the people who are building the technology, and the way they're building it, and the way they're pushing it, and also in the way, for example, the government might use it eventually for the military and so on. So I think a lot of the bad is there. It is not so much in the technology itself, which has the potential for both good and bad. So I just take, so that's one objection, which is the environmental objection, which I think very, very real. And now the other objections, so Elmo, you were talking about when you're reading something, you're not sure if it's written by AI. I think with that discussion, we have to get to the real issue, right? I mean, I know that obviously we all have expectations that have been conditioned by our whole experience, our cultural experience, our expectations. But so suppose it was a paper that was written by AI, and it was proving a theorem, let's say, and the proof was correct. No one had proved it. Would it matter that it was written by AI? I think what you're concerned with is that it has the name of a human author on it, who didn't write it, and who might not even understand how that proof worked. And that is, the unethical part is that they put their name on it. Right? It's not so much that the paper was written by AI. It's not the problem with the AI. It's a problem with the way that AI is being used as a tool by this person. Right? Now, maybe that person had some thinking behind it, and that's so they were able to coax the proof out of the AI system. The AI system itself could not have done that. So fine, they can be co-opted, but there should be some way to acknowledge that. The third issue that I think you mentioned, that it is wrong a lot. I must say that AI is wrong less and less. It is still wrong a lot, but it is wrong a lot less than it was 2 years ago. And you can fully expect that it will be wrong even less in another couple of years. So those of us who use AI, I mean, I'm not a super user of AI, even though I work in the field, but I don't use it very much at all. But when I've used it, it has been incredibly useful. And it has been absolutely right. I had to correct it a few times, but once I had done that, it did things that it would have taken me years to do. I could do that in 2 days. So clearly, it is very, very useful. And if I'm finding it useful, then millions and millions of people are finding it useful. You know, I'm the co-chair of the UC AI Research Enablement Committee, and we are just sending out a survey that I'm sure many of the faculty members here have already seen, and we are getting responses, a lot of responses, very quickly. I can tell you that a huge number of faculty at the university are either using AI or are interested in using AI for their research. We're not dealing with teaching, we're just dealing with research. So that is going to happen. And this is, I know we had the inevitability discussion. It's a question of, is it inevitable? Yes, absolutely. In the same sense that the cell phone was, the smartphone was inevitable, social media was inevitable. They do harm, but they do a sufficient amount of good, or are sufficiently useful that they will be adopted. And I think the question you asked in the morning, Dave, is the right question. We should not be saying don't use AI evil. We should be saying, what can we do so that AI is used positively in good ways, and the negative ways are checked and stopped, right? The environmental stuff, the fake, all the fakes and everything. How can we stop that? Instead of saying AI is evil, everyone should stop using it, because that is not going to work. I mean, that's just it's an aspirational thing, which will fall apart. And then those who are doing that will then become to be seen as Luddites, and will be yeah, I don't know. So I mean, I'm very aware of the harm. I mean, in fact, that's what I think about most of that, in terms of all the harms that it does. But we have to find ways to mitigate those harms and keep them from being realized, rather than just completely stopping it, because it won't be stopped.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
So first of all, the Luddites were right. They were absolutely right. But I definitely do not buy the inevitable conversation. Every single one of the big tech companies, Anthropic, OpenAI, et cetera, they are bleeding money, bleeding it. They have no profit model at all yet. Sora shut down this week because they couldn't justify burning down the planet and bleeding money to make, AI deepfakes of 16-year-old girls. And so Sora shut down. They lost their $1 billion deal with Disney, all kinds of stuff. Like, you really have to convince me this is inevitable. And I know somebody mentioned the Claude code leak today. Did you mention that?
I did, yeah.
So because I've been here, I haven't had time to dig into it that much. But what little I saw is absolutely hilarious. There are parts of it where if you look at how it spits out responses, one of the responses it spits out is like, yes, I have checked and no, this does not violate privacy concerns. And it's in a string to spit that out when it gets the question, not after it has completed the task. It's just lying flat out that there are no privacy concerns. I think if people understood how the technology worked better and all of the ethical concerns, there would be way less uptake on it than there is. But you really have to fight me to convince me that it's inevitable. I just don't see the inevitable argument.
But I think we'll have to wait to find out. But I think at least at this point, it might not be this kind of AI. It might be the next kind of AI.
Bluetooth disconnected. Bluetooth pairing.
The AI, exactly, yeah. I want to say something.
Here's the uprising.
Did you want to chime in?
Well, so unfortunately I don't agree. You know more than me probably, but I think it's all about how we use AI. So if we can teach that it's a tool to augment your capability instead of doing the work for you, creating that slop and everything, I think to your point, I'm a media person. But I just recently built my first supercomputer. I'm in the process of creating my own local model. This would have been impossible without AI. It's augmenting me and it's giving me added capabilities. And as far as the impact on the environment, I think now this becomes like any other problem, becomes an opportunity. Like, I think it is inevitable. I do think it is inevitable. The shape that's going to, the impact is inevitable, but I think that opportunity to how can we catch? I was actually listening. They're working right now at new systems designed to capture CO2. I mean, they are planning. They are using AI to reduce the impact, the ecological impact of AI. So to find solutions. So
they're hoping to do that. They're not doing that. Well, don't believe that that is happening as completed work and that, wow, AI has fixed the planet. Because I could say that I'm working on that problem, but that doesn't mean I've done that thing.
So,
I thought I saw hands back.
Go ahead, chime in, and then we'll.
Well, I want to give a few other people. I see some hands going here, but
yeah. Go ahead, Tony.
I don't like to disagree with Robin, or Ali for that matter. But I think
you're between a rock and a hard place.
what we need to remember is that large language models are not AI.
Right.
Yes.
Machine learning is a fantastic tool that we should be using in the sciences especially, and it just good old-fashioned machine learning does not require ruining the world, right? So maybe, and at least the first person who said this to me is like, maybe there's going to be a next thing after large language models, and maybe we'll just go back to using machine learning and not the generative part of it all the time.
But the generative part is the useful part. Right? And that's the one.
But it's not the only useful part.
I agree with you. It's not AI. I mean, we are misusing that term intelligence with these models. But that's a label that the world has adopted. That's fine. That's a philosophical discussion, which of course philosophers will have. But the utility is in the generative aspect, and also the danger is in the generative aspect.
I attended a talk yesterday with a curator who's worked around atomic energy and trying to connect this history of nuclear energy and really think about what this means and wrestling with what the legacy and continuing threat of nuclear energy is. And it's a form of power we haven't figured out how to remediate. We have despoiled parts of the planet that will never be safe for human habitation. And there's articles where these big tech companies are thinking of reopening 3 Mile Island, the same plant to power AI. So I think there's a weird parallel where it's we have this problem of how to power these data centers, but at the same time we haven't figured out this. If we're pairing it with nuclear energy, which we also haven't figured out how to safely deploy or safely use, I don't have a point. I guess I'm just throwing it out for maybe people who have studied this kind of conundrum a little more, to think about this pairing with nuclear energy. It's what does that mean? What does that entail? If they're already stressing these power grids too much where they need to turn to nuclear power plants, where are we going from there? What is the point? Is this so that they can automate speculation, automate financial speculation? What is the use?
It's an interesting parallel because it is a technology that felt inevitable once the capacity was discovered. And then we discovered the harm of it, some of which was not ever intended. I mean, it was developed specifically to cause harm, but then the scale of harm and then the resulting possibilities of that were something that humanity's grappled with for the past 100 years, right? Or slightly less, but will our relationship with AI be similar to our relationship to atomic energy? Is an interesting parallel.
Yeah, and it's a consequential technology. And I think your question brings up an interesting detail, or this comment, is that the inevitability narrative is an effective and potent narrative right now, because we haven't had massive AI company collapse yet. But what you're talking about is that we started to see some cracks in the armor. And I want to kind of do an analogical reasoning. Imagine you're in a small town that Elon Musk wants to win an election. And he buys all the advertisements in the town. And he sends a bunch of his people to the town. And he invests in infrastructure, builds hospitals, changes the policy at hospitals. That's what you're talking about. And the whole town goes, well, it's inevitable. This person's going to win. Well, it's only inevitable insofar as the funds continue. And the funds only continue insofar as there is an infinite amount of them to pour into. So we are actively pouring our economy into the hope that this generative thing actually works out. And what's really interesting about even the claims of this technology is really useful, which is cool and true, but keep in mind the infrastructure that upholds that technology is not stable. Meaning that I could install a chocolate river in Cincinnati if I had bazillions of dollars. And then you could just be like, holy shit, having a chocolate river is the best. And I'm going to do that. I'm going to go there all the time. It's going to change my life. I'm going to have chocolate constantly. My life is totally different now. And I don't know why you all don't understand how inevitable chocolate rivers are. And it's well, because you know how the infrastructural issues, I'm quoting Brennan Lee Mulligan right now, the infrastructural issues of a chocolate river are, it would be impossible. Which means anybody who's that's not a sustainable thing. No one should believe that will be here in 50 or 100 years, even if it changes the very meaning of cuisine in Cincinnati or wherever we are, right? But that's a collapsing investment. And if it doesn't land on its feet, then you're going to get privatization, where it's like, oh, cool, you want to have your hospital function? Well, in order to get the premium package where your doctor gets access to their notes, you have to pay more. But it was so useful, so we continue to do it. Like, that's the reality of that material, right? And so while it's useful and powerful and cool, it's still a fantasy. And while it feels real right now, yeah, because it's being handed to you in pamphlets. Like, my first game of Magic the Gathering was free. My first month of World of Warcraft was free. And then they charged money. Right?
And look at you now.
Yeah.
A chocolate river.
Exactly.
God damn it.
Where's my socialism river?
Yeah, so that took a turn I was not expecting. I'll just say it. No, but I do think there's some interesting things that have come up, and I want to come back to something Ali said, which I think is sort of percolating in this conversation, which is important to sort of keep track of, which is, yeah, so like especially in the context I work, one of the things you hear a lot, and if you hear people who do certain kinds of like AI ethics, you know, especially from the informatics side, they talk about this human in the loop, right? And it's presented as sort of this, the solution to all the kinds of problems we're talking about, right? Like, well, you know, yeah, sure, AI could potentially go wild, but you know, as long as we have the human in the loop, we can resolve this. But I think I agree with you that, you know, so some of what I think about this is actually, you know, some of the problems that we're talking about are actually on the human side, right? Because it's the humans who are writing the codes that become problematic, that are inserting certain questions prior to the point where they should be, right? And the certain, you know, systems that we're talking about are learning from what humans have done, right? They're learning from the codes that humans have written. They're learning from, you know, the way social practices function in this real world. So I think there is something really important there that, like, you know, part of, even those of us who are very, and I count myself as skeptical about AI, I don't think it's inevitable. But I think a lot of the issues and the concerns about AI, ultimately we have to understand them as human issues, right? That's where we should place them. But I also want to come back to, you know, just I'll put this out there, like, at least in a lot of what I think about these kinds of systems, both how they function, but also in terms of the kinds of impacts they're going to have in this world. AI, you know, this is why I kind of threw out the statistical component of what these systems are doing. I think we have to understand all of this in terms of the probabilism that's underlying a lot of them. And I worry when people say things like, oh, it's inevitable, because that's attributing a kind of determinacy to things that are at best probabilistic. And if something is probabilistic, then we have to account for the probabilism that not only those things might not happen, but also the probabilities that those things could go wrong, but also the probabilities that there could be some useful things that come out of this. And so that's the one thing I'd like, you know, I'd like us to all kind of keep weighing here, is the probabilistic nature of the very things we're talking about.
Oh, I just wanted to get back to this. I think it's dangerous to think about AI or large language models, generative AI, as a neutral tool, and to say that it depends on how we use it, and maybe some ways of using it are evil and some ways of using it are good. I mean, there are definitely more and less evil ways of using any tool, but people who know more about philosophy or technology than me might say that technology in general isn't neutral in that way, but especially AI, which is, there are these two different training steps, right? First, you train it to predict the next word in this large amount of data stolen from the internet. But the data on the internet is the most, like, the opposite of unbiased, the opposite of neutral. It's all the most disgusting and vile human urges that we have been able to put into text and then upload to the internet on Reddit and so on. So in a sense, it averages out a little bit, maybe statistically, because you get everyone's terrible opinions and then you get the average of that. But that the first part of the trained data isn't neutral. And then in order to get it to be a conversational chatbot type agent, you also have to do this reinforcement learning with human feedback, which molds it into, because most of the training data isn't like a conversation, so it wouldn't learn to give an answer, it would learn to continue some text. And then the reinforcement learning is very specific about what individual users want from it when they give a given prompt. So the tool does not exist independently of human users, because what the LLM is just the weights that it's been trained to adopt to satisfy our demands. It is only like the substance of the tool is just the uses that it's been trained for.
Yeah, I feel like I just want to push our cynicism a little deeper here. There's a lot of talk of inevitability, but inevitability is rooted in the history of technology and capitalism, and these arguments about the inevitability of AI are not new. These are arguments that have deep roots in the history of technology. And I mean, I look around the room, and I mean, myself included, like I'm wearing fast fashion, a lot of us are. We're at this conference because we took planes, a lot of us took planes to get here, we drove cars to get here, we're using plastic bottles. And I feel like there's often a sort of discussion of AI as a boogeyman that we're trying to identify as the sort of primary environmental destructive force in the world, but I don't think that it is. I think that it's almost like we're trying to kill a tree or cutting off a branch. This is a much more deeply rooted problem, and I feel like we have to recognize that this is something that has a long history and is deeply rooted in technology and capitalism, and treating it as an AI problem just completely misses what's really at stake. Because I mean, it seems to me that the primary cynicism from the folks here are coming from environmental concerns. And I don't think that we can really adequately address the environmental concerns of AI without thinking about the environmental concerns of all of the technologies that, I mean, have brought us here today. And I just say that because I understand that there's a lot of people who are very skeptical about using AI, but we've all endorsed cell phones and laptops, and we've replaced those cell phones and laptops, and those cell phones and laptops end up in landfills, et cetera, and so on. But I wanted to make that point. I feel like it's an important thing to keep in mind. This is really more deeply rooted in the history of technology and not just an AI-specific problem.
Yeah, I think a similar point. Anybody listen to the TBPN podcast? You heard of it? It started last year, got like 70,000 subscribers, made like $55 million, slated to make $30 million next year. OpenAI bought it today. So I mean, if Hershey bought a popular and upcoming podcast, I would expect to hear lots more soon about the virtues of chocolate rivers.
Yeah. Thank goodness.
And so I think, to this point, also, talking about technology as neutral is going to be different than talking about the corporate influence motivated to be making profit. So even if we want to talk about machine learning, that's going to be something different than whatever Sam Altman is trying to do.
Think about the other technology like cars. Cars seem inevitable because you build roads that make everything really far away. I'm from Oklahoma, where if you walk places, there's no culture for it. There are no sidewalks, first of all. But if you walk in the partial sidewalks in the suburbs where they try and pretend that there's sidewalks, people honk at you because there's no culture of walking, and only people who are poor walk, right? And it's weird, and it's really hot. But you designed the world to be car inevitable, and then you wander and you go, what am I supposed to do about it?
The cars did become inevitable.
But because we did that, because we decided that, it was not the car didn't get invented such that we built roads to be bad. We built roads to then make it so that people had to buy cars. Right? That's not
we will do that again. So my point is that, in fact, I would say that the best evidence we have for AI inevitability is that we are all sitting here talking about AI. And we've had this whole conference about AI. If AI does not look inevitable, why are we wasting time on it? We are talking about it precisely because it does look inevitable. we think that it's a big problem, and that's why we talk about it.
And the car allows you to drive 500 miles in a day. You can't walk that.
You can use a train.
Train or car.
Say hope.
You can say
It's
no.
inevitable. If you're gonna get to point B faster, you're gonna do it.
Train and car are not interchangeable though.
No,
And in fact, when they built the roads, they actively went out and destroyed the train tracks and destroyed all of the maps that showed where there had been trains so that no one would know that was possible, because they wanted cars to be inevitable, because capitalism, right? Like that's what it keeps coming back to.
Yeah.
That wasn't even what I was going to say, and now I totally forget what I was going to say.
I'm gonna,
really quick.
you know it? Yeah,
Yes,
yeah. I was gonna buy you time.
Thank you. No, I got it.
From the completely un-AI powered texture of the ceiling audio environment.
I love
that
it.
I keep looking up. I know. It's
Yeah, they're
amazing.
dancing and they're doing something right.
It is amazing. So I have, because I've been in AI for a long time, we have been 10 to 20 years away from AI superintelligence since at least I started doing AI in the 90s. And because I know a lot of the history,
Since
it's
the
also
70s.
since the 50s.
Yeah.
Since the 50s. We are always 10 to 20 years away from it. I went to plenty of these conferences about like self-driving vehicles 20 years ago as well. They were also going to be inevitable. And the argument there was like, look, we've got the technology. And I said, yes, but we don't have the infrastructure and we have no reason to build that infrastructure. So we won't be all having self-driving cars. And this is sort of where we still are 20 years later, because infrastructure is a public good that no one wants to pay for. So none of this sort of happens in isolation. It's all very deeply bound up with the capitalism and the infrastructure and the cars and OpenAI buying, whatever podcast it is they bought. And so again, this is why I've seen these, it's inevitable so many times that you just can't convince me that that's, where we have to go.
Thanks, yes. I probably feel like, is it an inevitable question, a little bit hard to make practical, but I'm wondering if people have thoughts about like a short to medium term question. I'm thinking of this as a kind of perception question. Like, what are the kind of metrics we'd be looking for to tell us what the trajectory looks like in like 3 to 5 years? I don't know enough to have like a lot of suggestions, but one variable that I haven't heard a lot about, but the one I'm putting forward is just like what nation states think about it. So I think about like the space race probably wasn't sustainable at the time. There's all these geopolitical considerations that led people to like keep amping it up. There's kind of a game theory problem. Maybe that applies to AI, but then also there's all this discussion now about like in the US, we might have had more recessionary indicators if it weren't for all this spending on data centers. And so maybe like the federal government has like a stated interest in not letting AI companies fail because it would affect certain metrics that might be really important for its self-image. So I'm wondering if like we have other kind of metric ideas about the state or in general that tell us about maybe like something that's less more tractable than like forever.
So I want to stop talking, but I just want to say, I give a talk tomorrow, and one of my slides is literally a tweet that Pete Hegseth sent out that was, I want you to use AI, and it was Uncle Sam. It was the propaganda, and it was literally coming from the government saying, like, you got to do this. And twice now, the president of the United States has said no states had better regulate AI. I'm going to make it a federal law that no states are allowed to regulate it. So I think we have some of that answer, which is that the government is in fact exerting pressure from above to say, no, don't regulate it, whether it's because it's good for propaganda or whether it's because of, yes, the explosion of data centers that is keeping the economy afloat. Like, who knows, maybe it's some combo of both, but like, I think we do have some of that answer already, and it's not good.
Yeah, but if I can say, sorry, I'm going to take my prerogative here.
Do it.
I want to tie back to something Tony said earlier, though, right? I think one of the dangers when we're talking about AI is we just talk about it as though it's this monolithic thing, which is part of why some people might feel it's inevitable. But we're actually really talking about lots of different things. And so I admire your point here, and I think it's spot on, but it's also going to depend on exactly which technologies we're actually talking about. So yeah, I just wanted to put that out there.
All my beef has been with generative AI. I don't take issue with most of the other AI projects at all. So.
I think the valuations of the big AI companies are 100% a bubble. Like there's not really a question about that, and they keep promising that they will buy so much RAM and compute and so on from each other in the circular model in the future. And the data centers that everyone is building also, like on paper, there's no way that they will actually be profitable because the hardware that you have to install, it takes too long for them to come online, and then the hardware deteriorates too fast or gets outdated because you built better GPUs or whatever. So, but the problem is that, and also if you think about like all these companies that are changing their name to include AI, and then their valuation goes up, it's exactly what happened with the companies that changed their name in the late 90s to add .com, and then they would double in their valuation. But also when the .com bubble burst, the internet didn't go away. The internet is like a more important and more invisible part of our lives now than it was at the height of the .com bubble. And AI, like the bubble will burst and lots of people will lose lots of money, and probably the taxpayers will have to pay for everything as always, but then the technology isn't going away. So like there's like a weird way in which the technology, and to whatever degree AI is a science, also isn't separate from it being a product and being like an investment structure. They are intertwined, but they're also like weirdly separate in the sense that like when the bubble bursts, the technology will not go away and people will keep using it and so on. So
I think that's exactly what will happen. I think a lot of these big AI companies will end up either gone or they'll become utilities. Okay. The winners will be some company like Google, for example, or something like that. It would be the winner. We can't predict that. But as you said, in the .com bubble, the companies were gone, but what they were doing was left behind, right? So I'll give you two examples of two companies, Amazon and Global Crossing. I don't know if anyone knows about Global Crossing. Global Crossing was a company in the 90s which was laying optical fiber. And similarly, there was another one called JDS Administrators. All these were high flyers. They were making no money, but were at sky high stock prices. Those companies disappeared. Right? Amazon did not disappear. Amazon lost money for 10 years, and now is one of the biggest companies in the world. Right? Unfortunately, I sold my Amazon stock and kept my Global Crossing. So,
which is why you're still working.
The point is that some did survive. And those that did survive succeeded beyond all imagination. You know, Amazon, Qualcomm, or because I was already doing this. But the thing is that, so you're right. The bubble will burst. It is a bubble. The hype about AI and all this stuff, the hundreds of billions of dollars, I think that is a bubble. It will burst. But what will leave behind is a very pervasive use of AI, and that is going to stay with us.
Yeah.
I would just like to note that if Ali knew what was inevitable, he would have held on to the Amazon stock. We're all soothsayers here tonight.
Much younger version of me.
He's wiser now.
Yes, some of us get wiser quicker than others.
Well, that's what human learning is about. You're talking machine learning, but human also learning.
Okay, so I rarely do this because I'm moderating, right? So I'm supposed to be invisible here, but I'm gonna like use my moderator influence here to steer us into a different area of cost. We've been talking about ecological cost. We've been talking about economic costs, right? I'm going to call Ali out again about this just because it's fun. And it's been happening all night. But it was implicit in Elmo's initial offering, which is the cost of the erosion of value of human activity. And it was present in your talk this afternoon. You know, of course, Coca-Cola used to have cane sugar in it, and then they replaced it because they figured that the market wouldn't tell the difference, and it devalued Coca-Cola. The same kind of thing is happening with AI-generated music. Some portion of the audience is not going to be able to tell the difference, be perfectly happy piping it overhead, etc. Ali, here's the call out. You come from a line of Urdu poets, right? So if AI can produce something that is convincingly like Urdu poetry, even if you can detect that it is different, it devalues the human activity of writing poetry. So what do we do with this kind of cost, which I think is at the heart of a lot of the anxiety around AI?
Yeah, I think that's a very real problem. It's not, I mean, just the fact that AI will cause people to offload their cognitive abilities, and therefore they will not be. So I mean, all those dangers are super real. And in fact, Mara and I were talking about this earlier, and I was like, I think we should regulate AI like a controlled substance, or something like that. So I mean, that is all fine. We should figure out ways in which we can educate people, we can have people work without completely losing their minds and outsourcing everything to them. Again, to your question, I think that new genres of art will emerge that will depend on AI. Whether I seriously doubt if anyone. Actually, my daughters disagree with me on this, but I still think. I still think.
Life lesson here.
No. But they agree with me. So I was telling you the other day that I don't think anyone is going to want to go and watch a ballet of robots, right? People will always want humans to be performed. Right? Similarly, when you go to, I mean, AI can produce paintings which are better than any human artist ever. But you will pay hundreds of millions of dollars for something done by a real human, and they will not pay the same for something that was quote unquote equally good in some superficial sense. It was not the product of a human. Right? We pay 10 times, 20 times as much for a handmade carpet than we do for a much more perfect machine-made carpet. So I don't think that human labor will be devalued. The problem is that a large fraction of human labor might be devalued. Right? And I think hopefully new human labor will emerge that machines will not be able to do. And that will still hold back. So I think that it's up in the air.
Go ahead.
I disagree.
Oh no! When Tamara disagrees, then it's crazy.
No, I have just today half of my class was missing because they went to a BattleBot competition.
Yeah.
And they have been building these BattleBots, and I teach human robot interaction, right? So they're robotic students. So they have been building these BattleBots, and they go to these competitions. It's a huge industry. People go there and watch this. So this is combating your point of nobody wants to see robots dance.
Oh, that's.
And there's other branches of this. There's like robot soccer derbies. There's like all of those things. People pay money to go there and see that. And so I think that what this will come up with is just a different kind of art.
Yeah.
I agree with you to that point that it won't devalue human art.
Yeah, exactly.
I think it will just be more. There will be more out there, and there will be sub-communities that will go for that. And eventually, I think it's about the availability of things. So if an AI model that has produced this kind of art eventually is replaced and dies and is not anymore available on some server, there will be people that try to keep it alive because it has created this kind of art. And then it becomes valuable because it is no longer producible.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
I think it's going to be a shift. That's all I'm saying.
I like a weird tangential point that I think is an example of what you're saying. And also what you were saying. So humans love to see robots do things. We love to go see the mechanical Turk play chess or whatever it is it did. Turns out it wasn't actually an automated device. There's like a little human controlling the mechanical Turk. But this is like this kind of manufacturing hype. Look at this really cool thing that was automated. Humans could do it, but now this machine can do it. And then years later, we have AlphaGo, and we have help me with the machine that beat Gary Kasparov, Deep Blue, right? Who beat him at chess, and this is amazing. Oh my gosh! All of a sudden, people are like, "I'm done with chess." Well, they weren't done with chess. People were still playing chess. It was as popular maybe as it was. Maybe it was a little more, a little less. But then the TV show comes out, The Queen's Gambit on Netflix. It's coming out during COVID. This is a beautiful piece of human-made art, human actors, human directors, human everyone else back in the creative process. There's some like cool dream sequences that I'm sure they use different kinds of AI technology to make. And all of a sudden there's this huge popularity in chess again because look, there's this human connection we have with this activity that requires a really complex cognitive skill. We've made it sound really interesting with this really cool story we've had. So maybe it would be the case that we have the AI-generated music. People get really interested in it for a while. Maybe they get bored because it turns out humans can do something way more creative and cool and interesting, and we can then come back to this human co-created activity.
Can I add a thought?
Sure, yeah. And then
So one of the things that I've been thinking about throughout this entire conversation is whether or not AI will actually make personal gatherings like the one that we're having right now more important again. Because I feel like we're seeing this already in classes, right? I mean, I'm giving out a lot less homework and I have a lot more in-person conversation with my students. Because I cannot trust them that they won't write their essays with AI. But I need to know if they've learned something, so I will ask them, right? I have a lot more conversation with them about the material now than I just used to have 5 years ago. And I think maybe it in a weird way backfires also in such that personal gatherings become a lot more important again and a lot more valuable. People will seek them out a lot more because of that.
We do value each other. We do seek each other out. Music is a part of all that. But I want to also highlight that all of the AI music is generated by people, right? That the process of building and training and repairing and the music that it's being torn apart and reconstituted into what you call AI music wasn't generated by that system. It was regenerated by it. That's the thing you can say. But the point is, like, whenever you're like, oh, this AI music, and if I'm the prompt engineer and I make a bunch of money selling an album by releasing it as an AI artist, I'm actually just taking all of the sounds that I stole and tore into that, but literally, I'm not inspired by it and then I try it out, right? I'm literally copy pasteing Marvel conflict, the Marvel sequels or Taylor Swift's actual sounds and using them. So like maybe at the very best stretch of this, you've got a kaleidoscopic tornado of weirdness, right? And maybe that's a cool thing, but it would be a cool thing to appreciate as art generated by a human. But that when you say it's like, oh, you've got human generated art and you've got AI generated art, actually open the door, labor's back, right? Humans are in there the whole time. We're just ignoring all of them. And we're requiring people to work with poor wages or to filter out the sort of goofy Nazism or whatever nonsense the internet is trained on it. Those are all humans, right? Which are not crediting with that artistic process at all. We're extracting. So like maybe, I build a trumpet that requires blood to play. Or like, I don't know, like are we having the debate about whether or not this is an inevitability or like is this the kind of thing that we're engaged in? The trumpet doesn't play itself, right? It has this cost, and the cost is not merely financial. It's literally humans generating it, something like this, right? So that element of it's AI versus humans again has blurred that line in a way that we shouldn't, because inside the mechanical turkey is in fact literal humans. And when Amazon, the great successful company, released a store that didn't have any people in it, it was actually powered by cameras with people behind the cameras, right? Like it's the same exact gimmick.
Yeah. So just to kind of chip in on this, in both the inevitability, I think. Sorry, just losing my train of thought. But I think if I learned one thing from the kind of attention economy literature is that there is kind of continuous push of kind of like, in a sense, kind of enshittification of technologies that try to kind of like manipulate people, and a long history of people walking away from those technologies as well. So these were the early newspapers that were free to kind of like advertisement based. If they would get too shitty, people would walk away and kind of like go towards new ones. And so, and I think there's a long history of those kind of things. So I think there's no reason why kind of like we couldn't walk away from these technologies and indeed like start revaluing different kind of human activities and say like, look, there is a new value now in, just like there's a new value in kind of like handcrafted carpets after kind of like artificial ones. There's a new value in kind of like more genuine kind of human interaction that is not technologically mediated and that's not kind of like AI mediated. So I think that, yeah, there is a kind of continuous pull towards these technologies, but also kind of like continuous resistance towards them, I think. And I think we're probably kind of like in some kind of like middle point at the moment, and not quite sure where we will be ending up. But I think that there is always going to be a human agency kind of like here as well, and people will walk away if things are just getting too bad, or can revalue other kind of things if they provide kind of better rewards, better things.
Yeah, so I actually want to push back a little bit, because so I want to go back to your example from earlier, the fast fashion, right? There was a point at which everyone wore handmade clothes, right? Clothes that were tailored to their bodies. Everyone, didn't matter who you were, right? Wherever you were, what culture you were, everyone just wore clothes that were tailored for their bodies. That changed, right? But even today, the value of getting that kind of tailoring, that kind of customization, it's still there. It's just that now it's available to a much smaller subset of society. And I think that's more of what we're actually going to get with some of the things we're talking about here. The average person is not going to have the luxury of having access to some of the things that we still think are valuable, but regardless of whether or not you think it's really valuable, it's just like going to reduce, it's going to be diminished in terms of everyone's access. And I think this is one of the lessons to take away from the Luddites as well. It wasn't really about the technology that they had an issue with, it's the social consequences of these technologies. And so, yeah, I think that's the thing I'll just, again, bring us back to is, what are the social consequences, even if the art is, I don't think it's going to be as good, but even if it's comparable, even if a lot of people like it, what are the social consequences for the things that we do actually value? They might still be valued, but they certainly might not be accessible to people at the same kind of level.
And the consequence may be a narrowing of who has access and can make a living at things that we otherwise value, like artistic practice, or like the kinds of learning that I feel like Elmo is trying to interrogate when he asks students to write about something. Suddenly, that kind of deep expert learning that allows you to self-generate text that demonstrates knowledge of a subject may just be narrowed in its adoption or its access for people. So this is part of why I was pushing at this kind of social cost of how is this going to revalue things that we think of as being important, sort of, forms of human expression. We are definitely at the end of our hour, and this is always the way that this is. We get revved up, and then like, I got to be the bad cop over here. And what we usually do is just offer folks here in the inside to say anything that occurs for them to kind of close out with. So that's all I'm going to say, and I'll just let each of you say if you have any parting thoughts, and then we can check. Jeremy, how do you remember how long we're supposed to be here? We got half an hour, a little less?
Half an hour, but
Okay, so people can linger and keep talking about this stuff and then wander out into the warm night in Northside. But yeah, let's just do a quick round of like, what are some final things that you didn't get a chance to get in, or that you want to say to wrap things?
I'll just say I'm giving a talk tomorrow at 4 o'clock or 3:45 that basically covers everything we said. Like, I don't know whether that means you don't have to bother coming anymore because we've all just had the conversation, or whether you'll get extra added stuff. There'll be pictures, I guess, tomorrow. So, but yeah, like literally almost everything that came up is in the talk that I'm going to give. So.
Chocolate rivers.
I'll add a slide.
You need to add or
I'll add a
slide, obviously.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I like the story of Clever Hans, who was a famous horse in the beginning of the 20th century, and there were US front page newspaper articles about this German horse who had been trained by a retired high school teacher to do math, and then tap his hoof to indicate the answers to the math questions. And it took them pretty long to figure out that the horse could not do any math, because when the person asking the question didn't know the answer, the horse also didn't know the answer. It was very good at picking up on subtle cues in the body language of the human to tell when the number of hoof taps was correct. And I think...
and the human didn't even know they were given the cues, right?
No, they did not. So, but it's interesting because people in machine learning use Clever Hans as a phrase to describe this. So you will you train a model to tell you how likely it is that a patient has cancer when you look at the image of the chest scan, and then the machine just gets trained on the resolution of the image.
Yeah.
Because the human doctor who thinks you probably have cancer puts you in the expensive machine, then you have a high resolution. And if they put you in the cheap machine because they know you probably don't have cancer, then the machine can just pick up on the human expert judgment. But when you look at it's super accurate, and you think it just detects cancer from what it sees in the image, but it's picking up on something else completely. And I think LLMs do a lot of the Clever Hans thing. When they give you an answer that is good for your question, they're picking up on subtle things in your prompt. And even when the answer is correct, they're never doing the math. They're never generating the answer in the right way. And you can tell by how they fail. Like, they fail in these bizarre ways. So why would we assume that if the answer is correct, that means they also generate it in a reliable way?
Yeah.
So I think one thing we didn't talk about so much is the point of the potential of descaling, right? So, and in a sense, right, if we all start driving self-driving cars, we'll lose the ability at some time to drive pretty much, but that's not so bad. Like, we lost, in some sense, the ability to do mental arithmetic with the availability of calculators. But I feel like with generative AI, kind of like, it is really the kind of organizing your own thought, basically the activity of thinking that is at stake. And so this plea of kind of like regulating specifically in kind of developmental and pedagogical kind of settings, I think is super important, because it might be that one of the reasons why it is an advantage now is that it's kind of like it's AI used by people who have been trained and developed in times before AI, and therefore have their kind of like expert judgment intact. And so I think it's really an open question whether you can have that kind of human kind of like who grows up in an environment that is kind of like completely kind of chock full of kind of AI generated and possibilities to generate things yourself with AI.
For some reason, I think I'm going to get into swing dancing. That's all I have to
say. All right. Well, thanks, everybody. If this is your first Alloy, thanks for coming. If you live in town, come back for more of them. We do 4 a year. Let's thank the folks that were willing to help us with this conversation. Jeremy, and I don't see Emma back there, but feel free to grab another round before you leave. Great. If you're a graduate student and you want to go home with food, talk to Tony. No, just take food. Just take food. Just take it.
In progressive, do not talk to Tony.
You can live off of the pakoras for weeks.
They're so good.
So, all right, thanks, y'all.
It's a really good connection.